Welcome to the Rich Report, a podcast with news and information on the world of big data. Today, my guest is from the Active Archive Alliance. We have David Cerf. David, welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much, and Happy New Year.
Well, it's great to have a 2013 behind us, and I thought this would be a great time for us to talk about something that you guys brought up recently, David. It was the 5 trends for 2014 in archiving. And well, why don't we get into it right away here? What was the origin of this list?
Well, the Active Archive is a group of member companies that all are constantly looking at how to address customer problems for making their data more available and accessible through archiving architectures. And so we're constantly evaluating the changes and trends that are driven by technology in combination of way the customers are using their data. And we felt like we had some good to update as we came into 2014. So that's where the list was generated by the member companies.
Okay, and you know, just in general, I mean, archiving is, with all this explosion of data, is this a problem that is only going to get worse, or is there hope?
Well, I think that there's hope because we're finding technologies and solutions that are addressing it. But I believe that companies are continuing to see this problem become compounded every year. Some of the things come from just the change in the technology itself. If we look at video content, for example, every time we see increases in frame rates, and that is if we want to see better quality production, and we go from 1080 to 2K to 4K to 8K, every one of those jumps is about a 4x increase on the storage requirement. And we see not just the traditional industries like media entertainment or video surveillance that are using video content, but the average company now has it, whether it's a training video or webinars that are being captured or whatever. We have more imaging content in our daily lives, and certainly mobile devices and consumer applications continue to really create challenges with it, and we all want to keep it. There's no concept of deleting. So those are the things that put the pressure on it, is how do we keep it all very effectively, meaning it's available to the user and to the way the applications want it, and then most importantly, to do it cost effectively.
Yeah, and David, there's a government component to this as well, isn't there, with HIPAA compliance?
Well, for sure, we could see any type of governance and corporate compliances that can put all different types of constraints on it. And medical imaging is a perfect example of you want to keep it, you're going to keep it for the life of the patient. If we see genomics and et cetera, and these are all very interesting data sets because, again, as we have more and more technology, it creates more and more data sets per whether it's an image within a radiology study or whether it's in the genomics as we create and develop more information. These data sets are just so large and the retention times are so long that we have to have effective ways to do it.
Okay, well, let's go into the list here, David. But maybe we should define first what do we mean by an active archive versus the old-fashioned archives that we've known in the past?
Sure. Well, the older concept of an archive was we put something and it was deep and dark in a way, and maybe it was inside. Iron Mountain's a great example where they had off-site available repositories, but it wasn't available. If we wanted that information, we'd have to recall it, and it might take an IT administrator to go back and pull potentially a tape or some other type of portable media and load that up and get it back to the user, or even recall it off-site and bring it back before you could have it available. The real change that we've seen is just by what we all daily, access in our daily lives, and that is we get all our information real time. So you and I could go back and even look at our bank statements. Typically, that may be limited to 18 months or so, but it's still readily available and accessible. And so this concept of being able to click and get it back quickly and available to us is this concept of active, to where we can have things that, based on the value of the data and how we want it, depends on how quickly. It might take a couple more seconds if it's a little bit older, but it's all available, it's all accessible, and we have tiers of storage. So we will integrate different technologies, things such as flash, with disk, with tape, all together. And it's intelligence that sits around and in front of these physical elements of storage It allows it to interface back with the user in the application, so it can be able to intelligently move from the very expensive tiers to the lower tiers. But to the user, his experience might be very seamless in that. And that is that all I see is maybe a file or an object, and I just know it's there, and if I want to click on it, well, then it's going to come back to me, and now the level of service of how fast it's come back to maybe an architecture and how much do you want to pay. But the active concept is it's there, accessible, available, and we're integrating over different technologies.
Okay, so let's to go to the list then. Number 5 says that this active archiving technology is becoming more mainstream in these long-term data storage environments. Is that something you're seeing? Is it happening now already?
Absolutely. I think we have seen other words to these type of concepts of active archives. Some of us might remember ILM and HSM, and those were really the beginning to it. And of course, those were used across general enterprise. Active archives are really evolving in certain verticals much more quickly, and those are where the pain points are really high. So again, media entertainment is a great example to where we've seen really great integration to this active ability to keep all your files online. But we're definitely seeing it come into the general mainstream within an enterprise, because if you're a user and you go home at night and you can get all your data that you want, your personal information, you come to work and you have to wait for IT guys, or it may take a couple of days to get your data back, it's very noticeable. And so we're seeing that the desire to have it in all our places of work is really becoming a demand by the user. And now that the architectures, and there's so many different options, and this is one of the great things about the Active Archive Alliance, there are multiple ways to approach this and multiple different vendor solutions, and they're readily available and they're very cost effective, and they can work with your existing technology. So these aren't forklift upgrades where you have to go throw everything you've done in your IT or your data center away. These are things you can add and leverage existing technologies together and bring that together. So that makes it very, very achievable to any type of business that's looking to be able to better manage their long-term data.
Well, then speaking to number 4, it sounds like, with an increased focus on data profiling, it comes back to this fact that this was user-driven. Is that the case?
Oh, absolutely. If it wasn't, then we wouldn't really be so concerned about the access to it, right? Unless we had the compliance and the governance. So it is the user who's looking for better ways to both make the data available to their environment. But a lot of it comes back to, again, the concept of the way applications work. So when we think of that, we do everything on our phones and on our tablets, that these are very real-time accessible applications. And we think of our data a little bit differently. We don't just bury it. We think about it as being valuable to the business. The data itself could be your business. And so that changes it. I think that's where that user drive comes from, just the nature of the way the applications behave.
And then as we move to number 3 here, David, we hear a lot about object-based storage and those kinds of solutions as trends, but in this trend, it says file-based storage will remain center stage.
Some great data and that is constantly brought out at the end of the year, and I just saw some things that we're talking about that. File-based is really taking, or let's call it NAS, right? Network attached storage, is really becoming so much more mature inside IT today, as where it had been very much fiber and SAN-based. We didn't necessarily have the performance, or people didn't think about the resiliency that we might have seen out of a big SAN environment. And I believe that we're seeing a lot more come out of NAS environments today. To where they're scalable and provide the type of performance, and they provide a simpler architecture to a lot of companies than having to put in large SAN environments. So I do believe that from an infrastructure play, that's going to support the real drive that we all think about as the way the user behaves, and that is file, right? You and I, every day when we go on our laptops, are opening and closing and know how to behave within files, and it's a very simple user interface. And even tape manufacturers have brought that into the tape standard, which is a nice part of an active archive architecture, is to provide a low-cost medium, and tape addresses that very well. and the fact that they added the linear tape file system format as part of the LTO standard. So it makes a tape addressable like a USB thumb drive. Now you can extend that file-based access down to what used to be a very complex medium, right? Writing to tape used to take backup applications or proprietary applications, and now you can even write to tape as you would any other file-based device. So I think that those simplicities in the way that we bring file-based solutions to the user makes it easy to add it to your environment, to be able to scale it as the technologies allow us to grow larger. So we see bigger disk or big tape subsystems, and they're just all file-based. That's a great thing for the user.
Okay, so that's with tape coming online as a NAS storage technology. What about new technologies that are gaining?
Well, I mean, would you throw Flash in that, or Object, or there's a lot of new technologies.
Sure.
Both of those are very important. I think that we see Flash not just being what's in our phone or in high performance analytic environments, and like big data is big D, big D, but we're seeing the integration of those technologies with things like tape to have a Flash tape architecture becoming interesting from the way that we could deliver solutions. So you can have a balance of performance where you need it, and then cost-effective deep and cheap on the backside, all presented as one solution. That's, I think, pretty cool. Object-based storage as well, being in its expansion into where it fits, whether it's an HPC environment or it's growing as we see larger environments where we want to be able to have easy access. So video is another great one for that. These are interesting in how they're being brought back into existing systems. So just how it's being integrated in what we already have and being made more seamless to the user. It's probably the most valuable part of what I think of as new technology, and that is the simplicity through the application side, add things in without having to force the users to get re-educated or the complexity on an IT department to add new technology in.
Well, great, David. Well, we've come to our number one, which is the continued growth of unstructured data. We're seeing this everywhere with sensors coming online and all kinds of new sources of data. What is the trend there as far as archiving?
Well, I think it goes back to the very beginning part of this conversation, which is that it's so prolific, what we're having to deal with data, and all that growth is coming from unstructured data. So we're really not seeing database scales that are change the growth curve. They're pretty consistent. We certainly continue to do data warehousing, and we do the traditional transactional things. But all the real data growth comes from this unstructured data, which is all the imaging content and other type of content that we're just generating. That the internet's a great example of where stuff is created and there's no concept of deleting it. So it compounds at such an incredible rate. And we're finding better and more creative ways to maintain it through storage, and the numbers just get incredible, right? When we think about the exabytes of data that are being created annually now, and that all that will be kept, it's a really a challenge. It's a real challenge for the customers to think about how do I cost effectively add something that can support all this data creation, and I don't think that there's any stopping it. I think it's just going to continue, and it's great stuff for statistics. It's how fast it keeps going. I think everybody keeps looking back and go, "Wow, I never thought we'd see numbers this big before." And as we go forward, they'll probably keep getting bigger.
Well, great, David. Well, kind of a wrap up here. With 2014 coming around, it seems like the stock market's very bullish. It's looking like a good year. Are you bullish on storage technology? Is a good place to put the money?
I am. I think we've seen a lot of consolidation in the space, and that's a typical thing to industries as they contract and grow. And what we've seen is really the big brand companies have continued to develop and expand. But there's a lot of great new startup technologies, and I think we've seen really great things come out of the flash industry, and it's starting to mature a little bit. The problem doesn't change. As we talked about these 5 things. These are items that just get solved today. They continue to grow, and as we see more applications drive, the need for faster, more accessible information, bigger information, that there'll constantly be new solutions. and we'll see storage companies continue to address that. So I think storage is a very critical part of what we look at as the IT infrastructure world, and it will continue to grow without question.
Well, terrific. Well, David, this has been very interesting, and I want to thank you once again for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and wish you the best for 2014.
You bet. Okay, folks, that's it for the Rich Report. Stay tuned for more news and information on the world of big data.